Listen, one last question that I think is a very common one. If the scripture says the man is to be a husband of one wife as an elder, what about the man who years ago, like 20 years ago, was divorced or had an affair? And he has since been confronted with it. He's fully repentant. He's been restored, and he has a proven track record since then. Is that person permanently disbarred from being an elder, or is there a place for someone like that being an elder, and then showing that even someone at that level can be restored graciously? Or is that an abuse of grace? What's your thoughts?
Well, you know, I think you're going to have different answers in different churches, and let me tell you why. The overarching qualification for many of these questions is he must be above reproach in the believing community and in the world. So, in certain churches, they would see that scenario and say, he has truly been forgiven, he has shown he has lived a faithful Christian life, he certainly could be an elder someday. There are other churches, because of their understanding of divorce and remarriage or adultery, they would say, no, he never could be an elder again. So I think you're going to get different answers based on how the church views above reproach. I think probably most of your churches would say no. Theoretically speaking now, that man could eventually be an elder someday because there is genuine forgiveness and that has been put away. He has proven himself faithful, and they may see the call of God on him to Acts 20:28. The Holy Spirit sets you as an overseer. So you will have different answers based on the different teachings of the church and the church's view of forgiveness and ministry later.
Okay. Bob, your thoughts on that?
I think it always needs to be very apparent that one who has fallen into sin, that there's hope of forgiveness and restoration to fellowship. I think the question of restoration to leadership is a more difficult one. In some ways, to see somebody who's been restored can be an encouragement to other people that there is hope. When Jesus says to Peter, after you have returned, strengthen your brothers. There is a sense in which somebody who has dealt with sin and has found victory has more standing, I think, with other people. But it's a difficult question, and some of that is also related to the circumstances of the failure.
Yes, absolutely.
If somebody's in a position of very high trust and there's been a lengthy relationship where there's deceit and whatever, that's a very hard situation to overcome in people's minds, I think.
Right. You're going to have to look at the individual situation and the gravity of the situation and what else was involved. Also lingering consequences. For example, if a child was brought into the world. So you have to look at all those things. But ultimately you come back as the above reproach. Will it bring accusation upon the church? Will the world look at this as hypocrisy? So you've got to ask all those questions. Yeah. I think even culture will determine some of this as we look at the above reproach situation. In certain cultures, that would not be looked at as seriously. In other cultures, it's an anathema. You're done.
I can just imagine some people that are listening to this might say, well, you know, you're complicating a simple matter. Well, why can't it just be black and white? It would be so much easier, right? So how do you respond to that? Is this situation ethics, or is it's just the realities of a broken world that we have to deal with?
I mean, all ethics has the whole aspect of implementation and application. So you have an ethical principle, but it has to be applied. It's not situational ethics. You have a rule, you have a norm from God, but then you have to apply it to the many complex situations. Martin Lloyd-Jones said many years ago, sin complicates things, and it really does. And I have actually talked to couples that when they were done explaining to me their 3 and 4 marriages, in and out of backsliding, going forward, I actually couldn't remember the whole story. It gets so complicated. Yeah. So elders, if you look at the Old Testament, are men of wisdom. And we are to be mature men. So elders have to use wisdom. They have to consult with the congregation. They have to feel the situation. And if there's any possibility that man becoming an elder with his background will bring accusation against the church, divide the church, bring disagreement, you just don't even do that. If there is agreement and you see that we can move forward and it's a glorious thing, then move forward with it. So you have to use wisdom in implementing truth.
I think part, Chuck, is that every one of those qualifications for an elder is a 1 to 10 issue.
On a continuum of
To
compliance.
say I'm a one-woman man, in your thoughts, in your over your whole life, to say I've never failed in any way my wife in that regard, is obviously would be foolish to even try to convince anybody of. So everybody falls somewhere in that range. It seems to me that one of the things that's critical is that an elder is to be, in a sense, in front of other people in the congregation, leading the way toward godliness, and not lagging behind them in that regard, so that they're an example, and people see this is the way my marriage ought to be.
Yeah, 1 Peter 5:3, not dominating those allotted to you, but being an example. So the example is very important.
Do you think, just on one last thing, in terms of it being a model for the congregation, it's one thing to be a one-woman kind of man, but to be seen that way. How important is it for a husband to demonstrate in tangible ways to the audience, his affection for his wife? For example, holding her hand after service, or on your way to the car, or opening the door, or even giving her a little kiss as you're walking out the door or something. Are those things appropriate, or is there a place for people to see that you really do care for your wife?
Well, of course, different cultures will determine some of that. In some
Yes.
cultures, that's almost not acceptable.
Yes.
I think it's the attitude of the man towards his wife in listening to her publicly, more than even holding a hand could be easy. But do you listen to your wife? Do you let her talk? Do you show preference to her? People can sense that, and in these little things. So, yes, we again come back to the model, the example to the flock, and as we are seen by the flock as respecting, honoring our wife, caring for our wife in the many, many aspects of life, that will be something that will be followed by others.
Yeah. Well, we could probably go for another hour talking about these things, but I think we've touched on the surface and delved a little bit below in dealing with some of the practical applications. I think one of the things I've observed as I listen to you, and as I've seen things in my own experiences, things aren't always black and white, and it's one of the qualifications among many, and they all have to be taken together and work together. My prayer is that God would raise up more men who would have a priority of their spouse, not only for their own life and their own benefit, but also it sets a standard for the church. And the more we fudge on this, and the more we water it down, the more the church suffers, and therefore the more the cause of Christ suffers. So it's an important issue, isn't it not?
Very important, because healthy families give a healthy church. And our society is doing everything in its power to destroy marriage and destroy male purity sexually, and to even find a young man to qualify who has kept himself pure is getting more and more difficult. So this is going to hurt the church. We're going to become Corinthianized. We're going to have, they say, it wasn't a problem that the church was in Corinth. The problem was too much of Corinth within the church. And we have too much of the world coming into the church, which will seriously damage the character of our future leaders. That's my really great worry.
It seems to me all three of us speak, and so we know what it's like to be behind the pulpit. And often we will make references to our wives, to our families, to our marriages, and whatever. And that can have a tone to it. That can speak volumes. A man who really loves his wife is going to be clear about that, and other people are going to get it. That sends a signal, I think, to the congregation. It sends a signal to women. This man loves his wife. And sometimes we can be a little sarcastic or whatever. And the illustrations, I used one of Gianotti and leftovers, and it was a great point, I thought, but probably it didn't put her in the best light. She's thinking, thanks a lot, you know. Everybody thinks all I do is serve leftovers. So there's a way in which I think we can show our attitude toward our wife and our love, because we talk about the things we like.
Right.
We talk about the things that we love. And when we do that about our wives, then that's a signal. I think.
Reminds me of an old preacher up in Canada. I think he's with the Lord, but he always referred to his wife as my beloved. As a young person, I
Yes.
thought that was a little hokey, but
Yes.
you always knew that he had a high degree of affection and honor, respect for his
Yes.
wife.
I have a Christian friend, and he always refers to his wife as my beautiful wife. Over and over, my beautiful wife.
Yes.
In fact, when I first met him, I didn't meet his wife, and I was wondering, boy, I want to meet his wife. She must be beautiful. He says this over and over. And it's very cute, but you know, it really sends a message. I think she's beautiful. And of course, that makes her feel good too. Coming back to what Bob said, you know, we have to be careful with joking.
Yes.
Because joking is a very delicate thing. It can be easily misunderstood, and it can be looked at. We're joking about our wife, and it may be funny, and certain people understand it, but others take it wrongly. So we do have to be careful with joking or little statements that mean something to us, but to other people could be misunderstood.
Well, a good illustration of this, my wife's uncle, who was a highly respected preacher, he was a medical doctor. His wife was a tremendous cook.
Yes.
Everybody loved being invited to their house, and she had a reputation. And he had a reputation of humor, and he would often refer to her cooking as, you know, we're having a burnt offering. You know, everybody just thought it was just cute, it was funny, and so I thought I was going to try that one day.
Oh, no.
And I referred to my wife's cooking once as, and she knew the background. She thought it was funny, but she told me after, she says, you know, no one else would understand that.
Yes.
You know, that background. So I've refrained from that. My wife's a good cook, by the way. But
You know, this brings up a good point. People are watching us.
Yeah.
If you're a church leader, people are watching you. And they pick up these little signals of how we speak about our children, how we speak about our wife, and they're listening and they're reading into these things. So we need to be conscious that what we say carries a lot more weight than what we think.
right.
Let me press that one more notch. I think that much immorality begins with humor. Remember the proverb that the guy says, he says something wrong and then he says, "I was only joking." When you look at the communication, whether it's cartoons, whatever it is, where you send them by email, and they're sort of edgy, and even things that are really inappropriate, but when you say them in a joking manner, you have a bigger margin of acceptability. I think that a lot of inappropriateness starts with inappropriate humor.
Yeah.
And that can be men with men, but I think even more dangerous is men with women. When you have sexual innuendo, when you have these double meanings, that's a really dangerous thing. But it sends a signal too. It opens a door.
Yes.
Oh, Alex,
Well, in Ephesians 4, we're even warned about coarse jesting.
Yes.
And I don't think as a church leader, any jesting should be around with sexual innuendo at all. That should be totally removed from our vocabulary because our society is so hyper sensitive to anything sexual. And so we need to be very, very cautious in our conversation, in our speech.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining me, and I pray that our discussion will be of benefit to others that are listening.
Yes,
Thanks.
good.
Thanks.
Okay.